At 71, Ron Howard just distilled a career into 7 rules, and hearing them changes how you see every film he made. Imagine a kid actor who never stopped asking what if, and grew into a director who turns chaos into discovery. That tension between curiosity and control is where his story begins. This is not a list of platitudes, but the backbone behind Splash, Apollo 13, and A Beautiful Mind, explaining why he still surprises people today. Each rule is not theory, but something he lived through choices, missteps, and quiet reinventions. Rule number 1. Choose curiosity over certainty. Early on, he could have settled into the safety of TV fame, but he kept asking what if. That curiosity pushed him from Happy Days into odd projects and eventually into directing films that took risks with tone and subject. Instead of repeating what worked, he chased ideas that felt alive, even when they seemed commercially risky. Splash was a leap into sweet, strange romantic fantasy at a time when studios favored formulas. Apollo 13 demanded both technical precision and human warmth, a blend few directors attempted. A Beautiful Mind navigated delicate mental health territory with empathy rather than spectacle. Those choices show a pattern. He followed instincts more than playbooks. Curiosity showed up in small habits too. He read scripts that others dismissed, talked through strange concepts with collaborators, and stayed open to rewrites that pulled stories in new directions. When a set grew chaotic, he treated the confusion as information, not failure. That mindset turned apparent problems into creative openings. It also meant he said yes to young collaborators and new voices, which refreshed his work instead of aging it into nostalgia. Choosing curiosity did not mean recklessness. It meant calculated experiments, testing ideas until something true emerged. He balanced curiosity with craft, using experience to keep experiments from collapsing into chaos. The payoff was a career that could shift genres while maintaining a through line of human clarity. Rule number 2. Listen more than you speak. On set, he was rarely the loudest voice. That quiet came from a deliberate habit of listening first and deciding later. Listening did not mean passivity. It was an active, sharp practice that let him collect tiny details other directors missed. A crew member's offhand idea about a prop, an actor's hesitance that hinted at a different emotional choice, or a line in a draft that made everyone uncomfortable for the right reason. Those moments accumulated into better decisions because he gave them room to breathe. Listening created space for collaborators to take ownership, which raised the bar for everyone involved. There are practical examples in his career that show how this played out. On Apollo 13, he trusted the technical advisors and let the engineers' cautions shape how scenes were staged. The result feels precise without ever losing human tension, because the film reflects real voices, not just a director's theory of how things should look. On character-driven projects, he listened to actors in rehearsals, kept what worked, and discarded what felt forced. That approach made performances feel earned rather than directed into existence. Listening also showed up in how he handled public reactions. He watched how audiences responded to early cuts, tracked conversations with producers, and adjusted pacing or tone when the film needed it. That humility turned potential missteps into refinements. It is a method opposite to imposing a single rigid vision. Instead of bulldozing through ideas, he filtered them through many perspectives and used that composite as his guide. Beyond filmcraft, listening affected his leadership. People who worked with him often describe him as someone who remembered small details about colleagues, a preferred coffee, a family anecdote, a previous success or failure. That memory mattered because it built trust. When a crew member felt heard, they were more willing to take creative risks. That dynamic created an environment where good ideas surfaced from unexpected places. The discipline of listening also kept him adaptable. Film sets are messy, unpredictable machines, and the best plans rarely survive the first day. Listening gave him a fast, reliable way to reorient without panic. He could refine a shot, rework a scene, or reframe a performance because he had been paying attention to the inputs all along. That steadiness made collaborators comfortable taking risks, which in turn made the work better. This habit did not make him passive or indecisive. It made his decisions smarter, grounded in reality rather than ego. He knew when to intervene and when to let the room find its answer. That balance is rare and powerful. It preserves creative ownership while steering projects toward clarity. A small but revealing detail is how he handled rewrites. Rather than dismissing notes, he cataloged them and looked for patterns. When multiple people raised the same concern, he treated that as data rather than noise. That practice turned listening into a form of evidence-based direction. It was how small observations became major improvements. A final point about listening is that it extended beyond the professional into the personal. He listened to family, to friends, to the quieter signals that suggested when to slow down or when to push forward. Those cues shaped career decisions like stepping back from constant directing and embracing roles that allowed him to mentor others. The net effect of listening has been a career that feels responsive and alive rather than imposed and static. That skill is deceptively simple and quietly disruptive. It shifts the center of power from a single voice to a collective intelligence. Rule number 3. Protect the people you love. His public image is famously private because he treats family as a sanctuary rather than a brand. Protecting loved ones is not a PR tactic for him. It is a consistent practice that shaped major career decisions and everyday behavior. He guarded his family life from tabloid curiosity, fought to keep children and grandchildren out of headlines, and chose projects that allowed him to show up for home without sacrificing creative ambition. That combination of boundaries and commitment created a personal life that could survive the pressures of fame, and it quietly influenced how he ran sets, negotiated deals, and handled publicity. Protecting people shows up in concrete choices. He turned down roles and scheduling demands that would have pulled him away from his family at critical times. He declined interviews that would expose personal details and gently redirected public conversations toward his work instead of his private life. On set, he made decisions that prioritized crew safety and mutual respect, not because it was fashionable, but because the same ethic that preserved his family also governed his professional relationships. That meant safer working conditions, clearer communication about expectations, and a culture where small kindnesses mattered as much as craft. There are moments in his career where this priority reshaped outcomes. When a production ran long or an actor faced personal crisis, he would rework schedules, call meetings, and create breathing room rather than press on and sacrifice people for a deadline. That willingness to reconfigure a plan to protect a person cost time and money, but it preserved relationships and long-term creative trust. Colleagues recall him stepping into conflict to diffuse tension instead of letting it fester, and that intervention often saved projects from unraveling. Protecting loved ones also meant modeling a certain modesty publicly. He refused to monetize every personal anecdote, and he kept family appearances rare and selective. In interviews, he redirected attention from himself to collaborators or to the subject of the film. That restraint extended to how he handled success and failure. After awards or critical praise, he emphasized the collective effort, and after flops, he absorbed blame without exposing teammates to public backlash. The protective stance created a net of loyalty around him. People who felt supported tended to return effort and creativity in spades. This ethic affected the kind of stories he chose to tell. Many of his films center on human bonds and moral clarity rather than celebrity spectacle. Those themes are not accidental. They reflect a worldview where relationships matter more than ego. That through line gives his work emotional coherence and a moral heartbeat that audiences respond to. On a quieter level, protecting people changed how he thought about legacy. Rather than chase personal mythology, he invested in mentoring younger filmmakers, passing on opportunities to collaborators, and making room for new voices to grow. That stewardship is a form of protection that looks decades ahead. It ensures that the people he cares about, professionally and personally, have durable careers and creative lives beyond any single headline. This rule is not about isolation or secrecy. It is about choice, choosing privacy and caring over exposure and short-term gain. It is about understanding that the cost of fame can be managed if you treat people as the primary asset. Rule number 4. Embrace failure as research. Failure was never a full stop for him. It was data. Instead of burying flops or acting as if they never happened, he treated them like experiments that revealed what did and did not work. Films that underperformed, scripts that stalled, and scenes that fell flat became sources of insight rather than shame. That mindset turned setbacks into a steady curriculum of lessons, and over decades those lessons accumulated into a kind of practical wisdom no classroom could teach. He approached projects as iterations. Early misfires showed him where tone could go off the rails and where character choices needed sharpening. Rather than blaming external factors alone, he looked inward to the craft. Was the pacing off? Did the emotional through-line vanish in the third act? Those questions led to concrete changes on later projects. For example, a project that struggled with audience engagement taught him to tighten structure and foreground human stakes earlier. Another that received mixed critical response forced him to refine how he balanced spectacle with intimacy. Each disappointment refined his radar for what truly resonated. This approach also changed how he led teams. When a production went south, he focused less on assigning blame and more on extracting usable information. Debriefs were practical, not punitive. He asked collaborators what they observed, cataloged recurring problems, and used that collective memory to prevent repeat mistakes. That practice created a culture where people felt safe to propose risky ideas because failure was framed as part of the learning curve rather than a career-ending mistake. Creative risk multiplied because safety and accountability coexisted. Embracing failure demanded emotional discipline. It required detaching self-worth from box office numbers and criticism. He cultivated a professional humility that allowed him to own mistakes without collapsing under them. That steadiness made it possible to try again, and to take on projects that others might avoid because they were unpredictable or hard to sell. It also helped him mentor others, teaching younger filmmakers to treat setbacks as material for growth rather than evidence of incompetence. Failure as research also influenced editing and premiere strategies. He watched audience reactions meticulously, treated test screenings as experiments, and used real responses to rework pacing or clarify character motivations. That iterative process sometimes meant painful cuts or reshoots, but it improved the final product. He valued truth over ego, willing to cut scenes he loved if they did not serve the film. That discipline turned sentimental attachment into rigorous storytelling. Finally, this rule shaped his long game. Instead of quick fixes, he invested in durable habits, reading widely, collaborating with diverse voices, and staying curious about new technologies and formats. The willingness to fail, learn, and adapt kept his career elastic. It allowed him to move between genres and mediums without becoming trapped by past successes or frightened by potential failures. Rule number 5. Keep rules loose at home. He treated home as a laboratory for softness rather than structure. Where the film world demands strict call times and rigid hierarchies, his private life embraced elasticity. That did not mean abandoning standards. It meant prioritizing warmth and presence over perfect routines. Grandkids were allowed to break the script. Late dinners became impromptu lessons, and family time was built around curiosity and play instead of strict schedules. Those choices reveal a larger philosophy. Rules exist to serve life, not to straitjacket it. This looseness showed up in small, revealing habits. He tolerated chaos in ways the film world rarely permits. A messy dinner table was an invitation for conversation rather than a problem to be fixed. He let children and grandchildren invent games, tell half-formed ideas, and interrupt adult plans without turning those moments into crises. That tolerance cultivated creativity at home, making the family a place where experimentation and forgiveness were expected outcomes. It also taught younger people that imperfection is acceptable, even valuable, when it leads to genuine connection. At the same time, he kept clear boundaries about what mattered. Work still had standards. Home had grace. The distinction was intentional. He maintained professional rigor on set while offering emotional flexibility off it. That balance meant he could demand excellence in storytelling, while forgiving human messiness in private life. It created a safe harbor for his closest relationships, which in turn energized his work, rather than draining it. This approach affected how he handled parenting and mentorship. He avoided turning lessons into lectures, and instead modeled behaviors through presence and example. Rather than policing every mistake, he used moments of failure at home as gentle teaching points. That method fostered independence. Children and collaborators learned to solve problems because they were given room to try. He believed that strict control stifled initiative, so he traded rigid rules for guided freedom. Keeping rules loose also reduced the performance pressure that often accompanies public life. Family members were not expected to perform for cameras or public expectations. Privacy and permission to be ordinary became gifts he protected fiercely. Those choices helped preserve mental space for creativity, because personal relationships were not constantly being curated for external consumption. On a practical level, this meant making scheduling compromises, saying no to publicity that would expose family, and building work rhythms that allowed for meaningful presence at home. It meant turning down projects that demanded total immersion when it would cost key family moments. Those trade-offs had professional consequences but yielded durable personal rewards. He learned that a life measured by presence and connection produces better stories than a life measured only by output. Think of this rule as an invitation to distinguish between standards and suffocation. Rule number 6. Know when to step back. Stepping back is not quitting. It is choosing the right vantage point. Over decades, he learned that staying in the thick of every decision can burn creativity into routine. So he deliberately shifted roles when the work demanded a new posture. Moving from full-time directing to producing and curating projects allowed him to shape a wider slate of stories without being consumed by the daily grind. That withdrawal from constant control gave him perspective, preserved energy, and opened space for new voices to lead. This decision was strategic and humane. It acknowledged limits without surrendering influence. Rather than hoard creative authority, he distributed it. That meant mentoring younger directors, championing projects he believed in, and stepping in at crucial moments while otherwise letting the team run. The choice to step back extended his impact. Instead of directing a handful of films, he could shepherd many more from a place of experience and restraint. Knowing when to step back required emotional clarity. It is easier to confuse activity with purpose, to equate being busy with being valuable. He resisted that temptation by asking simple questions. Is my involvement elevating this project or blocking it? Am I the best person to solve this problem right now? Those questions became a practical audit that prevented ego-driven micromanagement. The result was healthier ecosystems where collaborators felt trusted and empowered. Stepping back also preserved longevity. Physical and mental stamina matter in a career that spans decades. He restructured his workload to avoid exhaustion, choosing projects that matched his current energies and delegating the rest. That pragmatism allowed him to remain creative well past the typical career arc. Instead of fading out, he reinvented his role in an industry that often prizes youth over experience. The move also had cultural implications. By making room for others, he helped refresh storytelling perspectives. New directors brought different sensibilities, and his support amplified those voices without overshadowing them. That approach created a legacy built on stewardship rather than domination. Practically, stepping back looked like different daily rhythms. He spent more time in development rooms and less on set, more time mentoring and less time in camera blocking. He focused on shaping ideas and relationships instead of calling every technical shot. That reallocation of attention produced a multiplier effect. His best decisions could now seed multiple projects instead of just one. Finally, stepping back preserved curiosity and joy. When you are not responsible for every detail, you can notice new things, learn without the weight of immediate execution, and return to hands-on work when it again suits you. That ebb and flow kept his work vital and prevented creative atrophy. Rule number 7, leave the map, make the story. He learned to treat plans as guides rather than commandments. Maps can show routes, but stories live in the unplanned moments between checkpoints. That attitude shaped how he approached scripting, shooting, and even career choices. Rather than obsessing over a rigid blueprint, he allowed scenes, actors, and on-set discoveries to redirect the narrative. The result is films that feel organic, like they grew from real human impulses rather than rigid plotting. Treating a project as a story to be discovered keeps the work alive and responsive. This principle shows up across his filmography. Some of his most memorable scenes were not perfectly predicted in the initial outlines. They were found during rehearsals or on set when an actor tried something unexpected or a technical problem forced a new solution. Instead of erasing those moments to fit a pre-approved map, he often folded them into the film because they revealed deeper truths about character or theme. That flexibility requires confidence. It means accepting that you will depart from the plan and trusting your instincts and collaborators to find stronger paths. Leaving the map also means privileging narrative over formula. He resisted the temptation to follow whatever had just succeeded at the box office, and instead sought what served the story. That posture sometimes made projects harder to finance or market, but it kept his work distinct and emotionally resonant. When studios wanted a predictable rhythm, he pushed for nuance. When audiences expected spectacle, he insisted on human clarity. Those refusals preserved a creative integrity that shows up in the film's staying power. This rule extends to personal life choices as well. He did not chart every step of his legacy or try to manufacture a public myth. Instead, he pursued interests that felt meaningful, shifted roles when they no longer fit, and let his life accumulate into a coherent story through small, consistent choices. That approach created a legacy that feels authentic rather than engineered. Practically, leaving the map requires certain habits. He cultivated curiosity early and kept it alive through reading, listening, and experimentation. He surrounded himself with people willing to challenge his assumptions. He built feedback loops that honored genuine discoveries rather than surface-level reactions. Crucially, he maintained the courage to cut beloved material if it no longer served the story. That discipline prevents sentimental clutter and sharpens narrative focus. There is also a risk calculation built into this rule. Departing from the map can fail spectacularly, but it can also reveal work that feels necessary and true. He treated that risk as part of creative life, not as an existential threat. Over time, those gambles compounded into a body of work that feels coherent, because it prioritizes the story's truth over the safety of formulas. Finally, leaving the map is a call to ownership. If you make the story, you accept responsibility for its surprises, failures, and breakthroughs. That ownership fosters courage, humility, and continual refinement. It makes every project a living experiment rather than a static product. Ron Howard's 7 rules read like a playbook for a life built on curiosity, care, and craft. Choose curiosity over certainty, and you keep doors open. Listen more than you speak, and you let better ideas surface. Protect the people you love, and you preserve the trust that powers lasting work. Embrace failure as research, and you turn setbacks into lessons. Keep rules loose at home, and you let life recharge the work. Know when to step back, and you multiply your influence instead of burning out. Leave the map and make the story, and you stay true to what matters, even when the path is uncertain. Taken together, these rules explain why a career that began in television could evolve into films that feel intimate, urgent, and human. They are not commandments for perfection, but practices for resilience, small, repeatable habits that shape choices, relationships, and the stories you tell. Whether you make films, lead teams, or simply try to live better, these rules are tools for staying curious, humane, and courageous. Which rule hit you hardest? Drop a comment with the one you would steal for yourself. If you like this breakdown, like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories behind great creators.